Morning, YouTube. Let's get Instagram rolling in a minute. A little early. All right. Good morning, team. Happy Wednesday. Welcome to the PT on Ice Daily Show brought to you by the Institute of Clinical Excellence. My name is Julie. Happy to be jamming with you all this morning on Jerry on Ice Day. So today, Wednesday, January 4th, is the start date of our 8-week online cohort for Essential Foundations. We have ticket spots left. If you're thinking about jumping in, go over to ptonice.com, send one of us a DM, ask us any questions. We'd love to have you join us for this next cohort. On the road, well, first, Advanced Concepts also is starting next week, January 12th. So we got 2 of our online courses firing up live. We are on the road like 5 weekends in January. We're in Tennessee and California twice. We are definitely coming to a town near you. So all of that info lives on ptnice.com. Okay, let's dive into our topic today, which is a massive call to action for all clinicians. Stop artificially scoring the OASIS. Stop artificially scoring the OASIS. Now, I am specifically going to be talking about the OASIS, which is relevant to all of you home healthers out there. But substitute OASIS with any outcome measure or data set used by your company or that you use to show insurance companies. So what I mean by artificial scoring is not inaccurate scoring. So let me be clear. I don't mean inaccurate scoring. The OASIS, this massive data set, there's a ton of nuance. It's very complex. A lot of clinicians can really get caught up between a 2 or a 3, and they do it inaccurately, and they don't mean to. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is pure artificial scoring, the deliberate and dishonest reporting of a patient's clinical condition to represent a fraudulent, yes, a fraudulent clinical picture. That clinical picture being that a patient had a significantly higher level of impairment on admission versus reality, and that the patient made significantly more progress during your plan of care than reality. That is what I mean by artificial scoring. Artificial scoring is fraudulent scoring. Okay, so first, the OASIS is probably foreign to a lot of you home healthers. You're having a visceral reaction right now. You probably want to puke a little bit in your mouth when I say OASIS, but the quick and dirty, this is what it is. It stands for the Outcome and Assessment Information Set. And it's this massive collection of data reported by the clinician on evaluation and discharge. It's somewhat like the FIM or the CARE tool, if you're familiar with that from an inpatient rehab setting, but it's totally on steroids. So it's hundreds and hundreds of questions that the clinician has to ask. It can take a clinician, when it's all said and done, 3+ hours of their day to go see the patient, do the visit, do the documentation. Many of the questions are centered on functional ability. So, for example, the ability to safely transfer from bed to the chair, and it's rated on a 0 to 5 scale, 0 being they do that completely safely and independently, and then 5 being they are completely dependent, aka they're literally bedbound. You score these abilities at admission, and then you score them at discharge, and obviously the hope is that that patient's score has improved over your plan of care. Now, Why does this scoring matter? And there's two big reasons why it matters. First is that it is the basis for home health agency reimbursement. The agency is going to get a higher reimbursement for that patient if they have a high level of impairment. Number two, this scoring has a major part in determining quality measures for the home health agency, which result in a star rating. This star rating is made public to consumers on the Medicare.gov Care Compare site or their page. So basically, it's public facing. Consumers who are shopping around for a home health agency can go onto that site and they can see how one agency's star ratings compare to another. So, from a pure business standpoint, we can see why having a patient who has a high level of impairment on admission and one that makes a lot of progress throughout the plan of care is very advantageous to the company. And if you work in home health, you know that our companies want that perfect picture to be painted with every patient. And they will pressure us to create that perfect picture, whether it's reality or not. And we know that that perfect picture is not a lot of the reality of the patients that we see. Now, the great news here is that the clinicians are the one to do this scoring. And this is all clinicians who are doing that initial, it's called a start of care. That scoring is in our hands. We legally sign our documentation that is representing that clinical picture of the patient. Nobody else can do that but us. That's the great news. Unfortunately, that is also the bad news. The bad news is that this decision making is in our hands. Why is it also bad news? Well, because we know there are too many individuals working in the medical field who shouldn't be working in the medical field. Now, that is not the crew who's with me here this morning and who's going to watch this podcast. The ICE crew, you're doing things the right way. You are going through the work to accurately paint the picture of the patient, right? But unfortunately, there's too many of us out there who are not doing this with integrity and who are not doing this accurately. So, again, I'm not talking about the inaccuracy of scoring a 2 versus 3. I am talking about that blatant artificial inflation or deflation of the score. And I'll give you a perfect example. And this is something I see more often than I ever should. But I had a patient who had been being treated on our plan of care for a couple of weeks. I looked at his admission scores. He was rated as bedbound, dependent in everything: gait, ambulation, bathing, dressing, across the board. I walk in the door. He walks across the room by himself and shakes my hand. What he was doing with therapy up until this point, he was swinging a golf club with home health, walking independently, indoors and outdoors, dressing, bathing, all of that on his own. 2 weeks before that, he was rated as bedbound by the clinician that did his scoring. There is no way that this individual went from bedbound 2 weeks ago to standing, walking, and swinging a golf club. That was complete artificial scoring. And the worst part is that those scores, compared to the documentation, he had a tug time of, 7 or 8, something ridiculous. So clearly, someone who's bedbound is not even going to be able to do a tug. So we have clinical documentation and OASIS scores that are completely opposite, and there is no one to check this. This is going unmonitored, And that's what I walk into. I also walk into situations where I am doing a discharge on an individual. We have a lot of folks with dementia. If you're in home health, you know this is true. You see that population a lot. You know that more often than not, they're not going to make a ton of functional progress, right? But someone scoring their OASIS discharge score as independent or near independent when really they needed mod to max assist to stand from beginning until end. And this is happening all the time. And it's not, a lot of therapists will say nurses are doing this inaccurately. Guys, it is not just nurses, it is therapists. I would say I see it more from therapists than I do from nursing. And that's so frustrating and so sad. I mean, this is literally Medicare fraud, right? I mean, it's fraudulent activity. It's not, and not only that, but it's compromising our professional ethics. And it's just, I get so frustrated by this. And it's just like, why? Like, why are we doing this? And we really need to reflect on that. And we need to really think about the downstream effects here. And now I do want to point out that our companies and OASIS make it very difficult to score accurately and for them to just be okay with it, right? To paint that actual clinical picture that is accurate. Because what happens is, let's say we score this OASIS. It gets sent to the mystical OASIS team offshores where someone who has never laid on an eye on a patient ever in their life, they're sure as heck not going to know who Betty is and how she's functionally doing, sends our scores back to us and makes suggestions of changing that score. On admission, they're typically making a suggestion to make them appear more impaired. So, as the clinician who did that admission, I have to go through every single score again, and I have to justify my reasoning that I already justified, and I have to send it back to the mystical OASIS team. That mystical OASIS team, my God, they're not done. They send it back to the clinician. And you have to go through that process sometimes 2 or 3 times. And it's not a 30-second process. It takes a ton of time. And it's exhausting. So I can see why by the second time, clinicians are freaking burned out. They don't want to have to fight anymore. It's wasting so much of their time. They have how many other patients they have to document on. And so they just give up. They just give in, whatever, OASIS. I'll just say that the patient was way more impaired or they made way more progress than they did, because you don't want to have to fight anymore. When we do that, guys, we are creating so many downstream problems. What we have to realize is that if we are going to play in the traditional medical system, that time, that fight is the cost of our clinical integrity. I hate it. I hate that, right? But that's the price we have to pay. That is the price we have to pay for our clinical integrity. And it just shouldn't be that way, but that is the reality. So we need to gut check ourselves into saying, am I doing that? Am I succumbing to that pressure? Or am I going to continue to fight? Because let's think and talk about those downstream effects that we may not be thinking about. Let's talk about it from the insurance company's standpoint. Guys, if you're in home health, with PDGM, we have seen a decrease in visits, a decrease in reimbursement, right? I remember when I was at my orientation for my home health company, talking about PDGM and how we were given less visits for patients, but my goodness, we knocked it out of the park. We got patients better in less visits. Y'all, did we get those patients better in less visits, or did we just click the button that said they got better? Unfortunately, a lot of it, I believe, came from the latter. So, what is that saying to insurance companies? It's saying to them, oh, cool. These patients got so much better in less visits. Sure, we can keep cutting. Things are going in the right direction. We are so quick to point a finger at insurance and talk about the heartache we have from them cutting our visits. We need to be thinking about how we are contributing to that issue. Okay, next, from the patient's point of view, this is the most important. Guys, we are artificially inflating those quality star ratings, right? If we're doing that, think about this. Our friends, our family, us, we are going on to that Care Compare site. We're looking for a home health agency that's going to treat our loved ones with clinical excellence. They see a company, they've got 4.5 stars. Well, heck, those clinicians are doing things the right way, right? Maybe not. Maybe not, because in reality, again, those stars came from clinicians artificially scoring. So when we are trying to find a company and we don't want those clinicians doing ankle pumps and glute squeezes and long arc quads for 8 weeks, we choose the 4.5 stars. We could very well be walking into PT version 1.0. We are masking crappy PT if we are artificially scoring the OASIS. We are masking crappy PT. And we are showing the system, we are showing our colleagues, we are showing the world that this system works. Version 1.0 works. Look at how much progress we're making. And we know that the system doesn't work. So why are we going to engage in clinical behavior that is saying it does? Now, am I saying that if everyone fighting the OASIS and not allowing our signatures to be on our documentation until it is exactly the accurate clinical picture of our patient is going to make this massive change, this massive wave? I have no idea. That would be awesome, right? That's not what I'm saying. But I'm sure as hell saying that if we artificially score, absolutely nothing is going to change, and it's going to keep going in the wrong direction. Now, I know that fighting with your tablet and the mystical OASIS people is not sexy, right? No one is going to make a Instagram reel of showing your OASIS and how you fought the score and won. It's not sexy, right? But I want you to think about how often you guys fight, and you're tenacious and you're audacious in your clinical practice in different ways, and bring that to this fight, right? Those of you who are in the ICU and you are being audacious enough to not take the doctor's no for an answer when you ask to mobilize them on the vent, and you're going in there and you're going to walk that patient. Or think about how tenaciously we advocate for patients who we want to get into inpatient rehab, right? And we are going after family, physicians, case management to make that discharge happen. I mean, those of you who are an outpatient and you're going through the body chart and you're tenaciously and meticulously trying to find the origin of someone's low back pain to put that fire out. Think about how hard we go after those efforts and how strongly we advocate. Bring that back to in the home health setting when you are scoring that OASIS. Because at the end of the day, you are the person who is in control of that score. Your company, the mystical OASIS team, cannot bully you into changing your score. That would also be Medicare fraud. You get the final say. It just is based on how hard you're going to fight for it. What is that price you're going to pay to maintain your clinical integrity? All right. That's all I got for you. Something to really, really think about moving forward. Have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your Wednesday, and we'll talk again soon.